Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where no, your eyes do not deceive you. This was indeed filmed late yesterday. Why? Why would I do such a thing? Well, it turns out I have to be away from my desk this morning and I didn't want to not put up a Morning Movie News episode for two reasons. One, there's a lot to talk about. And two, I didn't put one up yesterday because of that surprise Ant-Man and the Wasp trailer debut. And I didn't want to miss two episodes in a row. Plus, because I filmed this the day before, you're getting it super early, like before 8 a.m., so that's always nice as well. I'm trying to get these things up a little bit earlier, and I certainly succeeded today. All right, so let's move on to today's stories, and that Ant-Man and Wasp trailer is the perfect segue to the first story. And then we're going to have, of course, the three stories as usual, and that viewer question. But yesterday was a banner day for Marvel. Their publicity team just teed that up beautifully. So they had the Black Panther premiere on Monday night, and they had the social media embargo. That means when you can, talk about the movie online, but you can't post an actual review. That lifted at 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, basically when the premiere let out. And Disney Marvel was like, yes, please tweet about it, and tweet about it people did. And then Black Twitter really ran with it. I think that's amazing. Black Panther trended on Twitter for most of the day, and that's thanks, I think, to quote unquote Black Twitter. I didn't come up with these terms, but I hope soon we'll be able to say that the Black box office is also equally on fire. But everybody has to see Black Panther for it to do really well. It's tracking phenomenally, over 100 million, and so that means more than just the Black community must be interested in it for it to be tracking at that rate. I mean, I think this is a little early for the hype train to leave the station. It's got 2 weeks they have to be able to sustain this, but if anyone can do it, it's Marvel. And this is not unusual. Usually what would be happening is that Black Panther would be opening in the overseas market, and they usually open their movies 2 weeks early. But instead, it's pretty much opening day and date, actually, this time around, which I think is interesting. But they kept the hype train and the publicity schedule as is. So anyway, everyone was talking about Black Panther. And then in came the Ant-Man and Wasp mania, because that trailer was sensational. And then in all that, we're getting to this story, and that's DC's announcement about yet another show they have announced for their streaming service. And that got not only lost in the hype, all the Marvel hype, but I think part of the reason it was ignored is that it just showed how the DCEU continues to make the same mistake, in contrast to Marvel never making that mistake. And that's the DCEU is just too damn complicated. I mean, as much as they seem to be trying to copy Marvel, why copy like the jokes? It's so surface oriented. Why don't you copy the spine of Marvel? And that's so simple. Marvel doesn't have multiple versions of a single character because that's too complicated, particularly for non-comic book readers. Comic book readers are, of course, used to dealing with this. But it's just ridiculous that the DCEU is planning to introduce yet another Lois Lane and another Lex Luthor, who here are apparently pals, although there is a precedent for it, which we'll discuss. But anyway, the show is going to be called Metropolis, and it is from the people who make Gotham, and I love Gotham. Although I have to say, it just cannot break through to become a phenomenon like the CW shows. The CW shows, I think Gotham is far superior to them, but the CW shows do much better. But and they're getting, the CW people are behind the Titans show on the streaming service. But so they're getting everybody. They're really working hard to make sure the streaming service does well. Don't forget they have the Titans show, and they're going to have 2 Nightwings apparently too, which is ridiculous. That's live action. And then they have 2 animated series, Young Justice and Harley Quinn. And now, of course, this show Metropolis. So it's from the creative team behind Gotham, and it's going to follow Lois and Lex before Superman comes to town, and they're investigating the world of quote-unquote fringe science in Metropolis and exposing the city's quote-unquote dark and bizarre secrets. That's a pretty good selling point, I feel. I'm kind of interested in that. And there has been a flirtation in the comics alluded to between Lois and Lex, pre-Clark Kent Superman, but that comes and goes. But there is a precedent for it, and as someone who loves these comic book stories, I recognize that, I respect it, and I'm somewhat interested in exploring it. I've always liked the idea, actually, of some kind of flirtation between Lois and Lex. But here's the thing. Isn't the Krypton show on Sci-Fi supposed to be DC, the Superman answer to Gotham, right? What about that poor show? And then also Lena Luthor's running around on Supergirl, which is also a Superman-based show. So how could you then have Metropolis in the mix as well? Also with Gotham, Bruce Wayne is there, younger Bruce Wayne, and that really answers the age-old question when it comes to Batman and his rogues gallery of which came first. Did Batman create his own villains, or were his villains so horrible that it created a need for Batman? And the show is kind of answering that, and that they're coming up at the same time. I think it's fascinating. I, again, love that show. But I don't, are they going to say that all this weird sciencey stuff made Superman need to exist? Well, Superman, he existed basically, I guess technically, since he was a baby, right? Because he was always going to grow up to be a superpowered being. Maybe it'll inspire a young Clark Kent in Smallville. He sees the news that Lois and Lex are reporting, and he's like, that's where I should move. Maybe they'll do it that way. I would actually maybe be kind of interested in that, come to think of it. Well, I don't know. This gets kind of interesting. But I have to tell you, for me, Superman has always been a harder sell, and I think his mythology doesn't run as deep. There aren't as many nooks and crannies, basically, and I think his rogues gallery, speaking of what Lois and Lex could be investigating, isn't as exciting. But again, love the Gotham team. I'm kind of interested in this, but I think that, the DCEU is consistently playing the short game instead of the long game, and the MCU is all about the long game. And in an effort to shore up their streaming service, although I am certainly going to subscribe, but they had me already. This is just like overkill, right? I think they're throwing their movies. And I think it doesn't help that nobody likes Amy Adams and Jesse Eisenberg as Lois and Lex. And the casting is going to be very difficult. Lois is a very hard character to get right. She can be really nails on a chalkboard if you don't cast it right. And so here's hoping they're able to do that. I don't know. I love the casting on Gotham, so maybe they'll do a great job. So we'll see. I reserve judgment, but I think that while the fan in me is interested in this, from a business perspective, I would say definitely don't do it. All right, so next up, I can't believe it. Disney, speaking of whether or not you should say yes to something, they are continuing with their Jungle Cruise movie, even though it's basically Jumanji. Yep, another Dwayne Johnson movie. I mean, I think he is overexposed, and he lucked out with Jumanji, largely, I think, because of the cleverness of the film and the supporting cast. And then speaking of supporting cast, oh, by the way, he's going to be in the DCEU too, Dwayne Johnson. But speaking of fellow cast members, Emily Blunt has just been added to Jungle Cruise. That's right, Mary Poppins, who is quickly becoming a Disney in-house brand, much like Ewan McGregor. And speaking of Ewan McGregor and Emily Blunt, anyone seen Salmon Fishing in the Yemen? It's a fabulous movie. Not as romantic as I would have liked it to be, but really good stuff. And of course stars the two of them. But anyway, Emily Blunt was a fantastic female lead alongside Tom Cruise in Edge of Tomorrow. But isn't she just Karen Gillan here from Jumanji? So it seems weird to me. I have no idea how this is not going to be Jumanji. Maybe they'll make it a period piece and it'll be part Tarzan. I do think Emily Blunt would make a fabulous Jane, particularly in the same vein as the animated version voiced by Minnie Driver. Ah, that was so good. Joan Collette Sarah, as we've discussed before, is Helming, the Commuter. Good action. He's a good action director. So, let's see it. And the Jungle Cruise certainly has its fans, tons of fans. Like, Jungle Cruise fandom is hardcore. So much so that in Disney World, they recently built a Jungle Cruise themed restaurant. But I don't know. Jumanji made $822 million worldwide so far. It's still climbing. And so everyone will have seen it. And they're making it, they haven't officially announced it, but they're planning a Jumanji 2. And they want to put it up against Episode 9 in 2019. I love it, Sony. But so I just don't know how Jungle Cruise can coexist. It seems ridiculous to me. It would be fighting Jumanji comparisons even without The Rock. All right, so that's the second story of the day, and I'm curious, how do you feel about Jungle Cruise with this new information about Emily Blunt, and do you think it can possibly coexist with Jumanji? All right, then speaking of Disney, Tom Hanks is going from playing Walt to another Mr. Nice Guy, and that's Mr. Rogers. He looks nothing like Mr. Rogers, just like he didn't look like Walt Disney. In fact, Walt Disney and Mr. Rogers look more alike than Tom Hanks does, either one of them. I find it so annoying. And this time, instead of Emma Thompson's P.L. Travers, Tom Hanks will melt the heart of a difficult journalist who initially thinks that Mr. Rogers is lame. Oh my God, it's like the exact same movie again. Just like Jumanji and Jungle Cruise, saving Mr. Banks in this Mr. Rogers movie. Now, it's not, this another one isn't from Disney, although you're dealing with two different studios and that other situation as well. But you know what? The difference here is that unfortunately nobody saw Saving Mr. Banks, which is so sad. It's such a great movie. Not only would I recommend Salmon Fishing in the Yemen, but I also strongly recommend Saving Mr. Banks, which is actually one of my top 3 movies of all time. Not only because it's a great movie about fathers, I think that's fabulous to focus on fathers, always important, and they don't get enough attention, but also creative collaboration and how it's actually beneficial to have people with very different perspectives and ideas for a property. Clearly, as you will see from the movie, Mary Poppins would not be as good as it was if not for P.L. Travers' not only contributions, but insistence. She had to really fight for the changes that she had made, and they were for the better. And I worry about the upcoming Mary Poppins Returns starring Emily Blunt because P.L. Travers isn't there to keep it on track. So we'll see how that turns out. So I'm curious, what do you think of Tom Hanks taking on another role like this? Do you think he looks anything like Mr. Rogers? I think I would have thought Owen Wilson would have maybe been an even more interesting choice. He kind of has a Mr. Rogers type vibe, and he was so good in Wonder, which I recently saw. Wonder is a very, very good movie. But you will cry. Be prepared. You'll cry during Saving Mr. Banks too. I really bawled my eyes out during that, and I've seen it multiple times, and I still cry every time. All right, so let's get on to today's viewer question. This is from Hector Raul Aldaco Ramirez. Hello, Hector. And Hector says, hi, Grace, viewer question here. Some little hand-raising emojis. And Hector says, how can they release a trailer for Mission Impossible 6 if they're still filming it? I saw the Graham Norton show last week with the main cast, I suppose, and they're promoting it. What's the point of doing that? And what's the point of doing that? And there are rumors about Solo still filming. Both have a ton of time filming to go. What's going on? Please pick my question. Love your channels. Greetings from Mexico. Hello, Hector, again. Great question. Very timely. And I picked it for a very specific reason, as you will see. But first off, I want to address Mission Impossible 6, because that has a unique situation. As you might recall, Tom Cruise, I think, either sprained or broke his ankle while filming, and that pushed back filming. So they might have planned to be finished at this point, in time, to do the Super Bowl promotion. But, either way, the Super Bowl ain't gonna move for no movie. So they really wanted the Mission Impossible 6 trailer to premiere during the big game. I'm sure they knew that months in advance, maybe even before filming. And so they, the cast will take a break from filming to go and promote the movie to coincide with the Super Bowl date. Makes total sense. That's the name of the game. And it's also not unusual, though, for a movie, even when a star isn't injured and filming has to be delayed, for a trailer to be released while the movie is still filming or being worked on in post-production. And often, sometimes reshoots will pop up, of course, as we know. The infamous reshoots. We're going to talk about that. But the thing is that's why trailers, the footage for trailers needs to be shot first. And we talked about that on the Ant-Man and Wasp shot-by-shot breakdown yesterday. And that's that a good director and a good publicity team will work together and decide from the script and based on the director's plans what should be in the trailer. And then the director will plan to shoot that first, not only so it can be in the trailer, but also so VFX work can be done so that footage is ready to go into the trailer. And you saw that beautifully done. A great example of that is the new Ant-Man and Wasp trailer, which has quite a number of visual effects completed work on display. And that stuff, I'm sure, was all shot very early. Now, the only problem here is when they include footage in the trailer that does not end up in the final film. I'm looking at you, DCEU, and this is just so confounding and frustrating to fans because, now we dissect these trailers shot by shot. We get very excited. And, especially like, for instance, that Joker grenade with the grenade in his teeth shot from Suicide Squad. We get excited to see the scene that goes along with these beautiful pieces of footage from the trailer. And then when we don't see them, I think we understandably are not only disappointed, but feel cheated. So I think there should be a rule that once footage goes in a trailer, that footage is locked for the final version of the film. This is what has those conspiracy theories out there about alternate cuts. This is what leads to demands for alternate cuts, and it's been a real problem for the DCEU. Now, of course, they could fix this by maybe doing a little better prep work for these movies just overall in general, so they didn't need massive reshoots. But I think this is an area where they've shot themselves in the foot numerous times. So I really would say that this is totally normal, but now with the way things work and that things are so VFX heavy and there's so much on the line, and I don't think studios have a particularly good grasp of many of their franchises and have to do last-minute fixes. Star Wars is having the same problem, just to be fair, with footage not showing up in the final final cut. Rogue One in particular, that was a big situation. But that really should be an ironclad rule going forward, that any footage in the trailer has to make it into the final movie. Not just for the sanity of the fans, but the sanity of the studio suits, who I'm sure don't like being asked to release multiple cuts of their movies. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories, Hector's viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.